The job seemed perfect. The pay was great. The hours were easy. But on my first day, I found a list of rules that made my blood run cold. We've all had bad jobs, but the stories you're about to hear are different. They're warnings. The first one. I was desperate. Fresh out of college with a useless degree and mounting debt. The online ad was vague. Night archivist for private collection. The pay was astronomical for what sounded like a glorified security guard position. The interview was in a sterile, windowless office downtown. A man in an immaculate suit, Mr. Sterling, didn't ask about my experience. He just stared at me, his eyes a pale, washed-out blue. He asked only one question. Are you good at following instructions, no matter how illogical they seem? I said yes, of course. I needed the money. He slid a single key across the polished desk. The address is on the tag. Your shift is from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Do not be late, and do not be early. That was it. I was hired. Right from the start, the red flags were there. The vague ad, the strange interview. But desperation can make you ignore your instincts. The address led me to a monolithic, brutalist building with no signs, no markings, just a single heavy steel door. The key turned with a deafening series of clicks. The air that rushed out smelled of dry paper, leather, and something else. A faint, metallic scent, like rust and decay. Inside was a reception desk. On it, a vintage banker's lamp cast a sickly green glow on a single sheet of paper. It was the list of rules. Rule 1. Do not, under any circumstances, use the main building lights. The provided desk lamp is all you will need and all you are permitted. This is a classic element of control, limiting sensory input. It keeps the subject disoriented and more susceptible to suggestion. I thought it was a power-saving measure. Weird, but fine. Rule 2. If you hear a book or a box fall in the aisles, do not investigate. It will be returned to its proper place by morning. My stomach tightened. Okay, that was strange. Rule 3. At precisely 3:33 a.m., you will hear a scratching sound from ventilation duct C7. It will last for 17 minutes. Pay it no mind. Rule 4. The leather-bound ledger on the central pedestal must never be opened. Do not touch it. Do not read from it. Do not acknowledge it beyond ensuring it remains in place. Notice the specificity. 3:33 a.m., 17 minutes. This isn't random. It's a ritual. He's not a guard. He's a participant. My heart was hammering now. This wasn't a job. It was a test or a trap. The final 2 rules made me want to run. Rule 5. If the desk lamp flickers twice in quick succession, extinguish it immediately. Get under the desk and remain silent until you feel a cold draft pass over you. And the last one. Rule 6. You may occasionally see a tall, thin man browsing the Western Isles. He is not an employee. He is not a threat unless you make eye contact. Your silence is your shield. He should have left. Any sane person would have walked out that door and never looked back. But he didn't. I stayed. The money. I told myself it was an elaborate prank. I sat at the desk, the green light painting everything in a nauseating glow. The silence was the worst part. It was so absolute, so heavy, it felt like a physical pressure against my eardrums. Then, it happened. A loud thud echoed from deep within the archives. A book. I froze, every muscle tensed. Rule 2 screamed in my mind. I just stared into the darkness, listening to my own ragged breathing for what felt like an hour. Time crawled. I watched the clock on my phone. 3:30, 3:31, 3:32. My eyes were glued to the vent, C7. The second the clock ticked to 3:33, it began. A dry, rhythmic scratching. like long fingernails dragging slowly, deliberately against sheet metal. He's now experiencing confirmation. The rules aren't a prank, they're real. And if rules 2 and 3 are real, what about the others? It lasted for exactly 17 minutes. The silence that followed was somehow worse. The rest of the night was a blur of paranoia. Every shadow seemed to move, but the lamp didn't flicker, and I didn't see the man. When 6 a.m. came, I fled without looking back, but I came back the next night. I don't know why. The third night was different. I was getting complacent. I almost felt brave. And then, from the corner of my eye, movement in the western aisles. I didn't turn my head. I just shifted my eyes. He was tall, so tall his head was bent to avoid the low-hanging light fixtures that weren't even on, and thin, unnaturally so. He wore a dark, old-fashioned suit. He was just standing there, facing away from me. I held my breath, my blood turning to ice. This is the moment of truth, the final, most important rule. And his curiosity, his human instinct, is fighting against it. He began to move, gliding rather than walking, down the aisle and out of my sight. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, and then the lamp flickered. Once, twice. I didn't think. I slammed my hand down on the switch, plunging myself into total darkness, and threw myself under the desk, curling into a ball. My teeth chattered. The absolute silence returned, 10 times more terrifying than before. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. Then I felt it. A cold so profound, it felt like it was leaching the heat from my bones. A draft that didn't feel like air, but like a vacuum. It passed over me, carrying a faint scent of dust and decay. I stayed there, trembling, until the sun came up. I never went back. He got out. But sometimes the horror isn't in an old building filled with rules. Sometimes it's in a place with no rules at all. Just endless, silent observation. My second brush with a job I should have quit came a year later. I was working as a freelance data analyst. An anonymous contractor offered me an insane amount of money for a 6-month stint in a remote Arctic research station. The job: monitor and log deep space radio signals. That's it. The station was a single, prefabricated module in the middle of nowhere. Just me, a wall of monitoring equipment, and 1,000 miles of ice in every direction. The silence here was different. It wasn't heavy. It was thin, empty. The wind was the only other voice, and it never stopped howling. For the first month, it was blissfully boring. The signals were just cosmic background radiation. Static, white noise. I logged it, filed my reports to an automated server, and read books. It was the easiest money I'd ever made. Isolation is a powerful psychological tool. Stripped of human contact, the mind starts to look for patterns, even where none exist. At first. Then, in week 5, I caught it. A sequence, buried deep in the static, almost imperceptible. A repeating pattern of clicks and tones. It was structured, artificial. I was ecstatic. This was it. First contact. I spent days trying to decode it, but it was nothing I recognized. No binary, no Morse. It was just a rhythm, a cadence, like a heartbeat. The signal grew stronger each day, more complex. It started to have layers. The central heartbeat was always there, but now there were other sounds woven around it. Whispers, sibilant, toneless sounds that almost sounded like words, but in no language I knew. This is auditory pareidolia, the brain forcing meaning onto random noise. But what's unsettling here is the signal's evolution. It seems to be responding. I stopped sleeping. I just listened, 24/7. I started hearing it even when I was away from the console. I'd be making coffee, and I'd hear the faint heartbeat pattern in the hum of the generator. I'd be outside checking the antenna, and the whispers would be carried on the wind. I tried to contact my employers. The automated server was the only thing that replied, with the same message. Continue monitoring. Log all data. Do not deviate. I was alone out here. Truly alone with this sound. In a fit of desperation, I started searching the station's hard drives. I found a hidden, encrypted folder. It contained the logs of the previous monitor. His name was Alistair. His first few weeks of logs were just like mine. Then, he started writing about the signal. Finding a predecessor's logs is a common trope in isolation horror. It confirms the protagonist isn't crazy, but it also shows them their future. He wrote about the whispers, the heartbeat. He said it was learning, mimicking his own speech back at him. His later entries were unhinged. It's not from up there, he wrote. It's a reflection. It's an echo from down below. His last entry gave me chills that had nothing to do with the Arctic cold. The ice is thin, he wrote. The sound is clearer out there. I'm going to investigate the source. After that, the logs stopped. Alistair was never heard from again. That's when I looked at my own equipment, really looked at it. The main antenna was pointed at the sky, yes, but there was a secondary sensor I'd ignored. A ground-penetrating seismic array, and its cable didn't go up. It went down, deep into the ice. The signal wasn't from space. It was terrestrial. The company wasn't looking for aliens. They were listening to something trapped beneath their feet. I switched the main feed from the satellite dish to the seismic array. The signal became perfectly clear. The static vanished. It was a voice. A deep, resonant, impossibly old voice. And it was speaking my name. I abandoned everything, got on the emergency snowmobile, and drove south until I ran out of fuel. I was lucky a survey team found me. From the vast, empty Arctic to the suffocating confines of a forgotten store, the final job proves that sometimes the scariest things are those made to look just like us. The last job was supposed to be easy. A friend of a friend knew a property owner who needed a curator for a few weeks. The property was a defunct, high-end department store from the 1950s, perfectly preserved. My job was to dust and maintain the displays. Specifically, the mannequins. The owner was an eccentric old woman who gave me the keys and one simple instruction. They're valuable, she'd said, her voice raspy. Just treat them with respect. They don't like to be ignored. I laughed it off. I shouldn't have. These weren't your typical plastic mannequins. They were old, made of wax and plaster, with real human hair and glass eyes that seemed to catch the light in a disturbingly lifelike way. Their faces were too detailed, their faint smiles too knowing. Automatonophobia, the fear of humanoid figures. It taps into the uncanny valley effect. The brain recognizes something as almost human, but the small imperfections create a sense of revulsion and fear. My first night was uneventful, just dusting and cleaning. On the second night, I noticed something odd. A mannequin in the women's formal wear section. Her head was tilted slightly. I could have sworn she was looking straight ahead when I left. I tried to rationalize it. A prank by the day staff, an uneven floor. But then I heard it, a faint, dry scrape, like plastic on polished linoleum. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Across the aisle, in the menswear section, a male mannequin that was facing the window was now turned towards me. And behind him, another, and another. They were all looking at me. My breath hitched. My radio felt 1,000 miles away. I took a step back, and a chorus of soft clicks echoed in the silence. The heads of the formal wear mannequins turned in unison, tracking my movement. It wasn't my imagination. This wasn't a prank. I turned to run, but my escape was blocked. A child mannequin, one I hadn't even noticed, was now standing at the end of the aisle, its little plastic hand held up as if to say stop. The next morning, the day manager does her walkthrough. She sips her coffee, checking the displays. She stops in the main atrium, where a new welcome display has been set up. A smiling family of mannequins stands around a picnic blanket. The manager frowns, tapping her chin. "That's funny," she murmurs to herself. "I don't remember ordering one in a security guard uniform." In the center of the display, a new figure stands perfectly still, a frozen, painted-on smile on its face, its glass eyes wide with a silent, unending terror. Static crackles, a distorted voice whispers, "It's so cold. I can't blink." Always smiling. "Join us. We're having a sale." The audio cuts to a sharp, high-pitched feedback tone,